Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our first presentation of the 2020 NFJE Virtual Symposium. I'm your host, Brian Browning. I am Senior Legal Counsel at Lenovo based in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm very proud to be a steering committee member of the 2020 NFJE Symposium. Today, we are honored to have Joe Rosinski, technologist and futurist with Thomson Reuters, discussing the topic of how technologies will appear on appellate dockets. We are fortunate to have Joe. He is an innovator and early adopter of all things computer related. His primary focus is around the future of technology and speaks globally about legal technology, cybersecurity, blockchain, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and robotics. He hosts a tech podcast with Thomson Reuters and writes about the future of technology as it impacts our personal and professional lives, especially in the legal sector. In his role at Thomson Reuters Legal, Joe manages a team of technologists for both the large law, corporate, and government divisions in the US. He graduated from Providence College with a BA in economics and sociology and holds a master's in e-commerce and an MBA from the University of Maryland Global Campus. Thank you again for joining us. And now I am pleased to present our keynote speaker, Joe Rosinski.
Brian, thank you so much for that warm introduction. Very, very nice of you to do that. I also, before I begin, I'd love to note two different people here. Martha Fitt and her team for helping out, as well as Tillman Breckenridge for bringing this all together from my side. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you today. Really looking forward to this conversation around how new technologies will appear on the appellate dockets going forward. Now, I spent a lot of time thinking about the future and what's going on across the landscape of startups, the financial industry, of course, the legal industry. So trying to pull all of that together and how it's going to impact all of our lives, not only within as judges as you are, but personally too. So professionally and personally, these are two key pieces to all of this as we look forward. So let's begin. So the first thing I want to do is talk about what is happening right now with technology, what we're seeing, what's going to happen going forward. Also like to get into, of course, artificial intelligence, machine learning, which I think you've all heard many times before recently, some blockchain technology. What's going to happen in blockchain that's going to revolutionize the way that we all live and work going forward. Also want to talk about digital identity. So we'll think about that a little bit. Deep fakes, which I think many of you have heard at this point in time, but I want to start to talk about how this is going to creep into our lives. And then of course, VR, MR, and AR. I'll define that a little bit later, but that's something that's coming faster than I ever thought because of what's happened so far with, unfortunately, the pandemic. And then lastly, if we have time, let's talk about VPAs, virtual personal assistants and bots, and how that's going to impact our lives going forward. So first and foremost, despite everything that's happening right now across the landscape in terms of the pandemic and other things that are going around throughout the world, I want to focus on what is so wonderful, what is so special today. We are living in this exponential growth period of time like none other ever before. It's a fantastic time, truly a fantastic time, where a lot of these technologies will start to build on each other and create a whole new world for us to live in and take advantage of things that we've never had before. So really looking forward to discussion around that. But let's first take a glimpse into what this looks like. Now, we all have seen this graph before, right? It's that exponential graph that we may have saw when we were little kids, right? So it's that exponential graph, right? But looking forward, what we want to do is take a step back. Now, what are we familiar with? We're familiar with linear growth and what that looks like and what that feels like. So for example, if I were to take 30 steps, 30 linear steps from right here, I might walk down into the audience and walk among you for a few minutes, whatever the case is. So 30 linear steps is roughly 30 yards. That's what we're used to. That's what our brains are used to. And this is something from Singularity University. Now, our brains have not changed physically in over 250,000 years. It's hard to imagine that. So I actually did my DNA test not too long ago, And I have a grandmother far, 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 far removed who grew up on the plains of Africa, right? And I started to think to myself, what did she know? What was she aware of? And well, she knew where to hunt. She knew where to gather. She knew where to get her water. All of those things were within reach. She knew where her relatives were. All of that was linear. That's what we were used to. That's what we are used to today, still. That's changing. So going forward, what we need to do is sort of level set and rethink about how everything's starting to transpire. What does exponential growth look like and what does it feel like? So this is the same sort of thing we just talked about, but if I'm going to take now 30 exponential steps, what does that look like compared to that 30 linear steps? Well, if I took those 30 exponential steps, I'm traveling around the world 26 times. It's unbelievable to think about. And of course, you all know what exponential looks like. It's a doubling of every instance going forward. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 as you continue to go. That's 1 billion steps. Again, this is something that I think most of us, at least I, have a hard time wrapping my head around initially. So going forward, what are we starting to see as an impact to everything around us? The first thing is drones. Now, I've been a big fan of drones for years, as far back as 4 or 5 years ago. And the drone that I have right now, it's as big as my foot, right? And I can take it up and fly 4 miles away. I have HD video of that, immediately feedback coming back to me, which is fantastic, although I don't fly it 4 miles because that's illegal. But you get the idea, amazing technology. So one of the things that people thought about several years ago was, what if we had lifeguards, and this happened in Australia, who basically were up on their perches looking for people that are struggling in the water. What would they normally have to do? Well, they pop off their perch, they run across the hot sands, they grab their buoy, they jump into the water, and they're swimming out to the people that are in trouble in the water, right? It takes minutes, 5, 10 minutes sometimes. So now they're launching a drone very quickly next to them. They're flying it above those individuals that are struggling in the water, and then they're dropping basically a buoy, that life preserver that pops open really quickly. And you'll see how that works on the screen. They actually captured this not long ago. Fantastic technology that's helping people out. And there's many use cases for this going forward. Other drones, believe it or not, in Dubai, they're starting to use drones for human travel. Still experimental at this stage, but you get the idea of being able to jump into this vehicle, one person, you put in the GPS directions, the location of where you want to land, it takes you up and it drops you off. Fantastic technology that's moving very quickly. This next piece is all about gene editing, which is frightening in some respects, but you get the idea of the ability to fix almost any genetic disease possible. So you're splicing it, you're pulling out the sections that are bad, and you're replacing it with some other genetic materials that sort of bypass that, right? So that's through CRISPR. Fantastic stuff that they're working on in that space. Now, because of that and other things that are happening at this exponential growth rate, a baby born today will live to what age? And I throw this out to you to think about for just a quick second. 85, 95, 100 years, 125 years. Well, if you have a baby today, then more than likely a baby will live to 125 years, which is almost impossible to think about again. But those advancements, this exponential growth that we're seeing, is going to have an impact on all of those types of things. What's next? Okay, over the last 3 weeks, I'm big into food, and because of everything that's going on right now, I have not been able to go to the restaurants or to all these different markets. So what can you do instead? Well, technology has now been put in place where you can, via the internet, taste what something will actually be like. If someone's preparing something, they're like, well, and they put it into this converter, and the converter produces gels that have salty, sweet, acidity, bitter, as well as umami flavors that you can then put onto your tongue. A little weird, I understand that, but this is the direction that we're going to start to see things move. What else? Smart dust. Each one of those little chips that you see in the left-hand side are a GPS chip. So it's a smart dust. And you see a little finger on the right-hand side. What you end up seeing is all these GPS chips that someone could smear on an individual, which is not a good thing, but they could also smear on a car, whatever the case is. Lots of positive, but lots of challenges with all of these technologies. Amazing potential, but we have to look at the darker side as well, which I know that you're going to have to be involved with many times going forward. So GPS-enabled smart dust is yet another one. This one's a little funky from my picture, but this is stem cells where they've grown human DNA, from human DNA, brains that are the size of peas that have the activity of a newborn baby. And what did NASA decide to do with this? Well, they decided to put it into robots. So robot spiders. I don't know why they're doing this, but you get the idea. Again, another example of what we're going to see in the not too distant future. One of my favorites in this space, and as judges, you might want to think about this because this is happening now. This is a PhD student. And what he came up with was this device that wraps around his ear, goes up towards his chin and just below his lip. It has 4 sensors on them. And what it does is it allows him to use his brain to communicate with any internet connected device. We're talking about mind reading technology. If you have 2 people with this device, its potential is that you could just sit there across from the other person, use your brain waves to essentially communicate. Now, you could think about yourself on the bench and then maybe the people that are around you wearing this, lots of privacy issues. But again, the technology is there. It's things that we have to start to think about as we're moving forward in this space. One of the last ones, and this one sounds ridiculous, but people used to say the same thing about digital currencies when I would talk about them 10 years ago. We're at a point where we will be able to communicate with animals. So the first thing they're really spending a lot of time on are with dolphins. But you can imagine a time not too far away where you'll be able to communicate through a device, internet connected device, with your dog or with your cat. It'll be at the level of approximately a 3rd grader, but that's the direction that we're starting to see this technology move. Last one. Now, this is the idea that the democratization of technology means that something that used to cost $5 billion, i.e. The autonomous vehicles that Google came out with, the program that they put together costs roughly $5 billion. I can go online and I can buy a kit right now to put in my car, which will essentially allow me to make my car autonomous. It costs about $40,000, still way too much money and probably extremely dangerous. But you get the idea of democratization of technology where it used to be very expensive. And now it's something that we all can take advantage of. You can use the cell phone. The original cell phone was $4,500. I can go on eBay right now and buy a cheap, very cheap, inexpensive phone for about 50 cents. And so these are the things that we're going to see going forward. Why? Why is this all happening right now? Well, it's what I call the Trinity of forces, the triad of forces that are all coming together right now to impact our lives, right? So the first is cloud storage. In 1965, IBM had a mainframe computer probably the size of a typical bedroom. It cost $165,000 and it had 5 megabytes of RAM, which is virtually nothing. Now we all can go onto Amazon and go buy the chip the size of your fingernail that for about $100 that has 100 gig on it. So you're getting to the point where you're able to get and leverage this technology to use very easily, very seamlessly, so that cloud storage is ubiquitous. It's nearly inexpensive or free for some people at this stage. The second of these forces is called processing power. Simply said, we're talking about the processors in our computers, the processors in our phones. It gives you the ability to figure out equations or to open up applications, right? So this is the easiest way of looking at it. On this picture that you see right now, on the x-axis you have time. On the y-axis you have calculations per second for a $1,000 computer. What does that mean? It means that if I bought a computer in 2001, it had the processing power of a gnat's brain. A little gnat running around, its processing power in 2001, that's insane. Think about moving forward. So 2009, a brand new $1,000 computer would process as fast as a mouse's brain, right? So you made a huge jump in that. Going forward in 2024-ish, we're looking at a brand new $1,000 computer that you'll probably buy off of Amazon will process as fast as our human brain. Now, because of Moore's law, which is that jumping or the doubling of these processing speeds of memory every 12 to 18 months, sometimes 24 months, in 2040 to 2044, we're looking at a brand new $1,000 computer, who knows what that will look like at that point in time, will process as fast as all of mankind, projected to be 8 billion people. So now unlimited memory, unlimited processing power. You tie that together with artificial intelligence and you have what amounts to a significant change in what's going on and what's going to happen for all of us going forward. So now I just want to recap this really quickly. Technology clearly is moving at an extremely fast pace. General education on all of these new topics, to me, is paramount for all of us to be able to do that. Really, really important. Contemplating the impact of technology will also be fascinating and sometimes extremely challenging if you start to think about every one of those pieces that I just mentioned and how that's going to play a role going forward within your courtrooms. Also, no one has all of the answers to how this is going to transpire, how it's going to impact our lives. But it's stuff that we have to start to think about, I would say now, if at all possible. Okay, let's jump into the first topic, artificial intelligence. So, first one, what we want to do is sort of level set really quickly and talk about the stories that led us to where we are right now. The first one is this. Garry Kasparov in 1997, I believe, played against the best at that point in time computer in the world, Deep Blue by IBM. And what he tried to do was beat Deep Blue, which had all of the AI at that point in time, to try to come up with a way to be challenged by Garry Kasparov, who was the best player, the grandmaster chess player in the world. And so what they did was it went head to head, and as we all know at this point in time, Garry Kasparov lost to the best AI in the world at that point in time, and that was a significant deal. People were like, that's astonishing. How is that possible? What's next? Well, what was next was Jeopardy, right? And we all know this story. So IBM Watson, at this point in time, decided to play the two best players at that point in time of Jeopardy in the world. And so what happened was IBM took all of this information off of Wikipedia, they pulled it down onto their servers, and they did data about data, which is metadata. So they marked up that information, they applied a bunch of their algorithms to it, so it was able to compete against these two humans in this space. Now, what I want you all to notice on the screen right now is this stack ranked system that's there. It says albinism and albino, then the other word. And so what that's saying is that IBM Watson was getting the answer from Alex Trebek and was stack ranking what makes the most sense. What's the most likely answer for this? And so it gives you the percentage. So anytime you hear about AI, it's typically not coming up with a single answer, but it's giving you multiple answers, and the top ranked answer is the one that's offering up towards the top. This was a significant deal because, of course, IBM Watson won handedly in this situation. Now, the next big step, and to me this is the probably most important step in this whole journey, so to speak, is this. This is a game called Go. I've never played it, and I actually only encountered it probably 4 or 5 years ago, but it's a game of two individuals playing against each other, one a white stone versus a black stone, and the object of the game on a 21 by 21 board is to take up as much of it as you possibly can, right? That's how you win. So they decided to play some AI in this space. And so what they ended up doing was basically playing the 4th best player in the world against, this time it was Google's AI, and they played them head to head. But instead of actually head to head where both would move at one point in time, they decided to give the human a 4-move head start. And in that situation, the AI actually won. And this was a huge deal, because when I put my stone down first, and then the other person, the opponent, puts down their stone, there's 150,000 possibilities after that. In the other game, chess, I make my first move, my opponent makes their first move, there's only 300 possibilities. The first 2 examples use brute force AI. This latter example uses deep learning, which is what we're going to talk about in a second. It's much more advanced, and it's the stuff that it's really starting to come along. So the last part of this story is that eventually, at some point in time, they decided, okay, let's see what happens when we have human versus AI and what potentially could happen without any head starts. And sure enough, 2.5 years after the human lost, they played again and the human lost again, but head to head. Elon Musk thought that it was going to take 10 years from that first game to that second game before it actually took off, where AI was going to win. Sure enough, that's what ended up happening, which was a big deal. Okay, so AI in the legal landscape. Stage one was denial, right? So people thought there's no way that artificial intelligence is going to have any impact whatsoever on our existence in this space. And so they realized over time that that's not the case and things are going to change. Stage two is where we are right now. So in stage two, we're talking about resources. We're talking about general counsels rethinking in-house. We're talking about firms working differently. We're talking about alternative sourcing in that space as well. Stage three is what we call complete and total disruption. We'll talk a little bit down the line in this conversation about this, but it is a point in time where you really start to get some movement within AI that changes the way that we work within the legal landscape. The courts are really starting to sort this out in terms of how they're implementing, how they're using it, and how they're interpreting things. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Why is this all happening right now? You see on your screen, there were hundreds and hundreds of startups in the legal landscape that came out of the blue. And they did this because there was huge margins in this space for quite some time. It was like one of the last industries that have not been touched by technology. So what ended up happening is it went from hundreds to now we're up to 2,000 to 4,000 different companies specializing in both artificial intelligence, but improvement processes within the legal industry. They're all disruptors. They're all doing one thing, either the business of law or the practice of law. So that's a snapshot of why we're even talking about this. So the parts of AI that I want you all to key in on a little bit are these. AI in the big basically is an if-then statement, right? So if this happens, then do this. That's at its most basic what AI is trying to do. Now, there are many different components out there. As you can see on the screen, this is just a subset of different pieces under the umbrella of AI. So if you look at it from the legal landscape, you're talking about these as the most important. So machine learning and natural language processing, of course, because we're talking about language fundamentally, right? Those are the most important parts within AI for legal. Now, if we start to think about this a little bit further and getting more granular as I go through a few examples, AI is simply rule-based systems, logic-based reasoning, of course, knowledge representation. Underneath that bigger bucket of AI, there's machine learning, which you probably hear more and more about. Supervised machine learning, unsupervised machine learning, and then deep learning. Very quickly. Supervised machine learning is basically a computer that has an algorithm. It's sitting in the corner of your room. You give it a whole bunch of data because AI loves data. And it looks for the white space in there. What's something that people aren't aware of? And then it services up to the individual. Could be the judge, could be the attorney, could be anybody. What do you think about this? And you say yes or no. That's good or not. And then you say no, it goes back, and then again, it gives you some more information. Unsupervised learning is similar, but it's just running new algorithms and trying to figure data out as quickly as possible. And then deep learning is a whole another game that we'll talk about in more detail in just a second. Okay, so just to give you an example of machine learning as it comes to computer vision. Now you'll see this within e-discovery, of course, but this is an example that hopefully resonates a little bit more. Computer vision tasks. So the computer is looking for, at each one of these pictures, the first picture moving left to right, computer is trying to figure out that it's a cat. Okay, great. Then it's saying, this is the cat in the space. So within the red box, it identifies this is the total outer limit of that cat. The next is object detection. So it knows that that's the dog and that's the rubber ducky and that's the kitten, or whatever the case is. The next one is also quite key to this. Instance segmentation. So it's looking at the full outline of the dog, the full outline of the cat, and it's moving into that direction. Now, why is this so important? Well, it's important because can you tell the difference between a Chihuahua and a muffin, a blueberry muffin? We may even have trouble with this. So the computer has to be able to understand and see these things. That is a significant thing, and it needs tons and tons of data, like billion pictures of both the Chihuahua and the muffin to be able to make that determination. Okay, the next one is something that I know you all will encounter going forward. It's about AI bias. I mean, that's the simple idea that with bias, we know that something's leaning in a direction that maybe it shouldn't be leaning in, right? So the people that are programming these algorithms sometimes may have a bias. It's not something necessarily you want to inflict on that algorithm. It's just naturally coming out. So these are the types of things we're going to see more of. And a simple example of that bias is that all 150 to 200 of you basically tell me, Joe, there's a wonderful bakery down the street. They have this amazing cupcake, and it's got frosting and all sorts of wonderful jimmies, depending on if you like jimmies or sprinkles, depending on what part of the country you're in. And it's amazing. And so I'm like, I got to go down there. I got to check this thing out. And when I go down there, it's not there. So, and I've tried 3 times, but every single time I go down there, it's not there. So there's some sort of bias there. There's some sort of misconstrued information in the way that it's all connecting through. So machine learning and overfitting is a big component to this. So our goal is obviously to avoid that random noise. Legal bots. Now, you will encounter these if you haven't already. They're becoming more and more popular. How do we handle this? What if something goes wrong with them? The code of it, or how it's giving advice. These are the types of things we're going to see more of. This chatbot basically enables people to make decisions a little bit more easily. You've probably heard of do not pay before, but it's the idea that I've gotten a ticket. You put the ticket into a scanner, and the computer looks at it and says, someone messed up some of the data on there, whatever the case is. So it's looking for those types of things. So that's one. Another, Visa bot gets people a green card. So it's helping people walk through some of this in different ways. Another example is the Australian bot. I know this is outside of your jurisdictions, but Australian bot helps with small organizations in terms of privacy policies, just giving you ideas about what's out there and what's going to come. Okay. In the AI world of e-discovery, I think you all either heard about this, encountered it, experienced it. This was the first space for AI within the legal industry. And you're talking about reducing 70% of the cost of a lawsuit because you have machines that are combing through 1 billion documents, looking for keywords or concepts or red flags, whatever the case is. Is it pertinent or is it not, right? So now there's tools out there. They've been out there for quite some time right now, but this is a perfect example of what we're seeing. There are opportunities and risks in this space. It allows companies to manage this, but it also creates some concern for others. So that's been there. I think you're all aware of that, but just wanted to point that out as one. This is one that's come about probably in the last 2 years. Prediction technology, and this is it's a little sensitive sometimes when I talk about this, especially to you all in this audience. This is the idea that there are companies out there that are combing through all the dockets. They're combing through all the language that you've put into your decisions. And they're saying, if a similar case were to come up in front of this judge, what's the likelihood that the judge is going to rule in my favor? We can kind of do that now. So judges' decisions some judges, I know none of you do this, but are reusing some language that are similar over and over. And it happens. We're creatures of habit, and sometimes it makes sense to use that sort of thing. But the algorithms are using that to determine whether or not you might decide one way or another. There's actually percentages provided to these types of things. So again, there's opportunity and risk there as well. It helps the attorneys sometimes to figure out, do I want to present this argument in a certain way? Do I want this judge? Can I try to get a new judge maybe in this space? Again, things that are out there just to think about. Further out, the last one that I want to go through in this space, this one's further out, I know. So imagine a scenario where strict code leverages nearly everything that's out there as if-then statements. So the law is so codified in such a direction, maybe tax law where it's really much more precise in most respects. It says, if this happens, then this has to happen. Well, maybe you don't need a person to do that. Maybe you have the computer do that, or you have the computer give the judge, the possibilities. Hey, it will look through all the data and kind of figured it out. Here's the augmented intelligence. Here's the possibilities. Here's the stack rank, just like going back to Jeopardy, of what we think makes the most sense going forward. So lots of risk, lots of opportunity, we will see how that comes to play out. All right, so the next one. This is the recap. AI on the bench, of course. So AI is moving very fast, not as fast as some people had originally thought. So jobs are not all going to be going away in the next 5 years. 10 years, there's going to be some definite impact. 15, 20 years, we'll see. Initially, of course, this will be considered that augmented intelligence that I've just mentioned. AI bias is real. It's something that a lot of groups are working through right now. So it's something that we all need to consider as well. And then lastly, eventually machines will make basic judicial decisions. Hard to imagine, maybe not, depending on your perspective on things, but there is a school of thought that says if you have enough data and you have enough precedent and you have enough information all around that to allow for this sort of thing to transpire, it's hypothetically possible. So it's something I think we have to start to think about and talk about a little bit. All right, this topic, blockchain, the next one, is near and dear to my heart. It's one of my favorite topics out there, period, because I think it is so potentially transformative for all of us in terms of how we interact, both personally and professionally, and especially within the legal industry. So let's dive in. If you haven't heard this already, or if you have heard this already, I apologize, but I want to go through it really quickly just for those who are a little bit less familiar where blockchain even came from. So blockchain is the underlying technology behind, of all things, Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin came out in 2009, and it's sort of the fundamentals underneath it. Now, why did this come out then, and why is it important? So the history. So you think back to 2008, 2009, there was a small financial crisis that I think we're all aware of. And what happened was you had large institutions, banks that were going under. You had organizations like AIG that was on the precipice of falling in itself. These were institutions that were massive, that were what some people call single points of failure. So if they go down, there's a ripple effect across the entire industry, and everyone has horrible situations that come because of that. So what someone came up with, and this is where it gets a little weird, no one knows as of now who came up with this white paper, and it's basically an 8-page white paper that outlined this concept. It said, instead of having a single point of failure, let's distribute that. In fact, for the example of Bitcoin, which I'll branch off in a second, you have 10,000 computers around the world that are all running the same software that basically need to prove that something happened. So in this instance, I need to send money to Brian, right, to introduce me. I said, Brian, I need to send you 1 Bitcoin, which is now like $9,000 or something like that. So what happens is I have a digital wallet ID. He has a digital wallet ID. He gives me that ID. I type it into, or I copy and paste it, because it's really long and ugly, into a bar, and I say, I want to send him 1 Bitcoin. I click go. At that point in time, basically all of those 10,000 computers or clusters of those computers start coming together, and they say, okay, 1, does Joe have 1 Bitcoin in his wallet? So it verifies that. And then secondly, it says, okay, let's send it off to him. Does he have a wallet? Okay, good. And then they need to come to consensus around that. So they need to agree that this all is going down. So the fundamentals of blockchain, if you were to take anything away from blockchain, it is a database. That's all it is. It's a database that's distributed. So it's not that single point of failure. So there's 10,000 computers, probably more now, that are all doing this. In the Bitcoin example, it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash transfer. There's no central banking authority, which is frightful for some. It relies on cryptography that's been around for, since the early 80s. The nodes have to agree. So those computers are also nodes, are also servers. Whenever you hear those 3 words, essentially they're the same thing. They all have to agree. Now, the frightening part about this whole Bitcoin example or some of these cryptocurrencies is I can send 1 Bitcoin off to someone in Iran or North Korea right now. Not allowed to do that, but I could, because it goes around the banks. It goes around the government agencies. These are things that we all have to think about going forward. But fundamentally, what I want you to take away from blockchain is that it's a distributed database, and there's a ton of potential. And let's talk about that now. So this is how it worked, right? So what I just sort of mentioned to you and Brian, my exchange. So I want to send money to Brian. It then goes to Brian. It then checks with all those computers in the upper right-hand corner. And then it says, yes, this is true. Joe's sending the money, let's certify this, and then it gets added to that ledger. So blockchain is also considered, it has a ledger that's immutable, so you cannot change it. Once it's up there, it's permanently up there. Okay, so a really quick sidebar, I apologize for this. This is something I think is important for just anything when you think about encryption. I want to explain encryption because it's part of blockchain, it's part of pretty much every exchange that we do these days. Might be through email, might be through your own banks, all that fun stuff. The original encryption came from Caesar. It's called the Caesar cipher. And the idea was that he wanted to communicate with his battle commander, right, out there in the field. So before Caesar was going to go to war, he basically told his battle commander a code. And only Caesar and the battle commander knew that. Nobody else knew what that was. That's the private key. So there's a private key and there's a public key. The private key is something you keep to yourself. You never share unless you absolutely have to or need to. You keep it to yourself. So he shared this key. The key is this. Well, you see at the bottom. The private key is this though. Shift back by one letter. All right. So this is going to make sense in a second. Shift back by one letter. Now, the public key is something anybody can see. Doesn't matter. Anybody can see that. And it doesn't matter because it's garbled, it's encrypted, right? That public key anybody can see and they can verify, okay, this is something that came from Caesar. So Caesar wants to tell his battle commander something. He basically sends this letter that has Caesar's stamp on it, right? His wax seal on it. That's the public key. So if someone were to knock the horse person off their horse and grab this thing and look at it, they'd be like, what does it look like? Well, it looks like this. So they open up that thing and they can't read it. Only person that can read it, yeah, Caesar, and then of course the battle commander. So let's decrypt this. So what the battle commander knows is shift back by one letter. So in this instance, he has a private key. He's looking at the public key, which is at SVOOPX, and he's saying, okay, go back by one letter. So if I go from S back one letter, I get to R, right? V, I go back one letter, go to U. Go O, back one letter, N. You get the idea. So Caesar basically said, run now. I know, kind of goofy, but you get the idea. That's how encryption works. Total sidebar, but I think it's important generally to have an idea about what this stuff is as it applies to blockchain and a lot of other technologies that are using it today. So why are we even talking about blockchain? I'm going to get into much more of the legal aspect in just a second, but it's because of the token revolution. So roughly in 2014, we started to see a lot of these cryptocurrencies come out, right? No one really paid attention to it till 2017. And what that meant was that what you're seeing on the screen right now are all these little companies that decided to raise money by basically opening up a website saying, this is what we're going to do. This is our white paper saying exactly what the company is going to do. And then on this day, from this day to this day, let's say a 2-week period, you come to our website and you give us a Bitcoin or you give us half a Ethereum token. And instead, we'll give you 10,000 Joe coins. So you now get 10,000 Joe coins, which are like pseudo shares, but clearly not something the SEC sanctions. And with that, you put in your digital wallet into your token, and you're then able to eventually do something with that. As you could see, they went on an exponential curve. It completely took off. There were hundreds, if not thousands of organizations that basically went down this road to raise money. It's a fascinating concept that did take off. It's since crashed, but it's still there. So going forward, what we've seen is there's in the upper left-hand corner, 5,161 different cryptocurrencies out there. Each one of them has a different purpose. Some of them are companies, some of them are trying to supplant other currencies that are out there like the euro or the dollar, wherever the case is. But there's a lot of value and ideas behind this. They got up to $750 billion market cap. Now it's roughly around 250 billion. So really quick, I know this isn't directly connected to you, but I wanted to give you a bigger picture. So regulation in this space. IRS sees cryptocurrency as a property. FinCEN sees it as money, of course. CFTC sees it as a commodity, and the SEC also sees it as security. So it makes sense. What they're talking about and how they're connecting to themselves is fairly obvious. Challenges ahead. There's a lot of challenges. So one of the caveats that I said about, and one of the positives and negatives about blockchain is that it is immutable. So data privacy is a problem. So once you start putting information about yourself, whatever the case is, up into this space, you're talking about potential with GDPR and CCPA in California. So those are things to be aware of as well. So the blockchain of things, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I want to focus in on one of them, which is going to be of most concern to you. Probably, if you haven't seen it already, which I'd be impressed if you have, just because it's a little more cutting edge, it's a little further out there, is smart contracts. So how smart contracts work, I'm going to go into detail in just a second. But real estate, so blockchain is going to impact real estate. Every piece of real estate at some point in time will be put onto the blockchain. We'll talk about that in detail in just a second. Boardroom, I will not talk about. So recording which C-suite voted for various proposals. Identity, I will talk about in just a second. Chain of title, so tracking ownership back to property back to creation. Another huge piece. Authentication, so verifying diamonds or signed sports memorabilia will also leverage blockchain technology. And then notary services may be impacted in the not too distant future, so that you don't really necessarily need a notary if you can actually use blockchain to verify that someone is who they are. Rental contracts, I will hold off on that. If you all want to talk about that later, I'm happy to do that. That's another huge area. Music licensing, money transfer, we know that one very well. In terms of like Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies, they're basically allowing you to trade money and send money to each other. So let's do a deep dive on this one. Now, you all have legal backgrounds, I know that. Just imagine a friend or someone in your family comes to you and says, can you please I know you're a judge, but can you pull a will together for me? And you're like, I really don't do that, but I'll paste something together for you. So you set about doing this, right? And this example I know is extremely silly. I came up with it a few years ago. It basically says this. It says, upon the parent's death, they have two kids, kid A and kid B. Both kids have to be married upon their death. Otherwise, if one kid is married and one is not, the kid that's married gets 100% of the estate, and the kid that's not married gets nothing. If neither kid get married, I don't know, it gets donated, right? So you are tasked with now opening up your Word documents and pulling in different phrases from things you've seen before. You build the will, and this is where it changes. So the will changes, and now it's codified. So basically, all of the triggers inside of that document are now codified. And I don't expect you all to look through the code and understand it, but I'll walk you through it really quickly. It's simply this. The computer now has this will, and it's looking for events that are supposed to happen. The first event that it's looking for is the death of the parents. So every single day, the computer, through an API call, basically a computer-to-computer call, maybe to the federal government, maybe to a state and local government, pulls back and says, so it calls every day. And then finally it says, both parents have passed. It's heartless, so it goes on to the next task. Next task is determine whether or not both kids are married at this point in time, at this juncture, right? Comes back and says, one kid is married and one is not. So it then goes on and says, so that kid that's married gets 100% of the estate. It then sends all of those assets, and for sake of argument here, it's all liquid asset, it gets sent directly to that kid. All of that on the right-hand side is automated. Doesn't require any human intervention. I know that you can poke a ton of holes through this, but this is a smart contract because it's working on the blockchain. It's immutable. So once it's up there, it's supposed to be locked in, right? You'll be able to append it, I know, with proper keys, the private and public key. If someone says, I want to make a change to it, you'll be able to do that. But these are the things I honestly believe you'll be seeing in the not too distant future. So that's a smart contract and coding. The next one is dispute resolution. I'll go through this very quickly. This is the idea that as we start to expand what we're doing more virtually, you can enter into the agreements on your phone, right? So I enter into this agreement with somebody. And this is just handshaking. It's then stored onto the blockchain. So it's that intermediary third party that no one can disrupt, no one can control. It's stored there. So it's locked in, right? But there's a problem. So you have a disagreement. So then what do? Well, you then use this online dispute resolution that's leveraging the blockchain to say, I'm going to submit all my evidence electronically. The other individual does the same sort of thing. Then there's arbitrators, and this is where it gets a little funky, but there's arbitrators out there that are not necessarily legally educated, and they're using wisdom of the crowds and gamification so that those individuals, those arbitrators, are not trying to game the system because they get paid based on who wins. It's a little longer story. I would love to go into a little more in depth, but just for the sake of time, those arbitrators are all over the place and they're trying to figure out who is in the right in this space. And fundamentally what they do is they say, Alice wins, and then the funds are then deferred or are sent to her. So then she actually wins in that instance. So this is dispute resolution going forward using a little bit of artificial intelligence, but blockchain technology too. So as I wrap up with blockchain is here. It's an immutable database. That's the most important thing. You are going to see it in the next several years if you haven't already, maybe in that smart contract world, but in other aspects, you're going to see that part. The data itself, I read about this just recently because I wasn't sure. I wanted to make sure. I know that this has no true relevance, but the Supreme Court is seeing this as something that's also very important to consider as evidence going forward. There's digital signatures that are attached to it, so we know that whatever information has been uploaded should be legitimate. The DAO, I did not talk about this, but this is the next iteration of what businesses will look like. They're decentralized, autonomous organizations. What does that mean? It means that it might take 5 people to run the organization of what would have been 5,000. There's an example that I have that I might have to talk offline about, but it's the ability to take computer code, the blockchain, to make decisions, to have things move forward in such a fashion that it's much easier to run. But again, there's going to be issues with that in terms of people and their jobs, unfortunately. But we'll see. Smart contracts will be coming to a docket near you probably in the not too distant future. We will see. Okay, digital identity. This ties into the same sort of thing that we've been talking about with blockchain, but it's a whole different section of that I want you all to be aware of because, again, another area that I think will start to percolate in your space. So when I've gone through this blockchain concept, it's basically you now can tokenize everything. So you can take something like your car, your house, and you can tokenize it. What does it mean? It means you basically create a hashed version of that. It's a certificate that says that I have ownership of this car, such that now you can put it on your digital wallet, which we'll talk about in a second. And so if you wanted to send it to somebody, I can simply say, okay, send me the money. It goes into escrow for a second. And then boom, I then send them that token, literally a digital token, almost like an email. Once they have it, it's on their phone, it's encrypted, it's taken care of, it's on the blockchain, so they know that it's theirs and everybody else around knows that it's theirs. This will happen and it's happening now, for real estate. They're doing it in the UK. They're starting to do it in the US in different spots, but it's very fringy, edgy, early days. But anything that's considered an asset will be tokenized going forward. Again, something I firmly believe you all will start to see in the not too distant future. This one, I was at MIT recently and they talked about it and I just think it's fascinating to think about. Most of us, whether you know this or not, 1 out of every 2 of you, your information was purged, unfortunately, during the Equifax breach, right? They first thought that it was on the dark web, but then they realized that more than likely China has it and they're building profiles on individuals in some control of things, maybe, unfortunately, people that have control over certain things, maybe even judges, right, who make decisions. And if they have this profile about you and they know about you and information about you, they can potentially do something. That's what's talked about in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times recently. But this is what we're talking about, digital identity, which means that the government more than likely will soon issue us, instead of a social security number, a brand new number that's on the blockchain that they give you both the private key and that public key, goes onto your digital wallet. So the next time, let's say we're all going to go to happy hour after this, we would normally show up at the bouncer at the bar, and you have to show them your digital ID, right? Or your ID. It has your eye color, your weight, your full address, your picture, all of that information. What do they need to know? All they need to know is that you're of age, right? So this whole concept is basically pushing that into a QR code that is able to verify. It has a picture and a QR code that says, yes, I'm of age or I'm not. And then the bartender would scan that. Tons of use cases for this. So digital identity is another component that'll be wrapped into contracts, be wrapped into litigation going forward that you'll start to see a little bit of. Okay, and this is that digital ID, right? So on your phone, very different than your bank app right now, will be the ability to put your birth certificate, your social security number, that new version, right? Your driver's license, all of that will be on your phone. And you're like, well, what if my phone gets lost? What if I left it on and someone's able to get to it? The big difference now and going forward is that you have control over this, right? And it won't be 160 million people all getting hit at once, which is what happened with Equifax. So 160 million people, because of a breach, all the information was exposed. So the idea is moving that to the individual. Now, how will that look within litigation? How will that look within building contracts and adding all this information to it? There's a lot to think about. I know that. So going forward, this is one other wrinkle that I want you all to be aware of. And it's not something people talk about too much, but so we're moving to this world of decentralized existence, right? So like those computers I was telling you about. So instead of having one single computer, huge mainframe that's controlling all this information, has all the information on it, someone hacks it, they're able to pull all that out. Now we're talking about distribution of encrypted information across the board. And the outgrowth of that are hundreds, if not thousands of new companies that are leveraging this technology. The first one I'm just going to show, and we'll go through most of this pretty quickly because there's a lot of them, is a little funky. So IPFS, upper left-hand corner, the green box. What that means is interplanetary file system. Sounds a little sci-fi, I know, but it's the idea that it can compete against Amazon Web Services, so cloud services like Amazon or IBM or Microsoft. And the idea behind this is that every one of us has a personal computer, you have your work computer, you have your home, whatever, your phone, you have extra space on there. So hard drive space, you have extra processing power. You can get paid for people to use that when you're not. So you get paid for just opening up that space. It's encrypted, you can't see it. It's little chunks, it's hashed up among thousands of different or hundreds of thousands or millions of computers. So it's potentially going to disrupt the Amazon Web Services or the IBM or Microsoft. It is called decentralized. They're dApps, so decentralized applications. Instead of the apps that we have on our phone, they're decentralized, right? And there's categories that you can see above. So exchanges of information or money. Those are money exchanges for cryptocurrency that are out there. They're doing the same thing. Prediction markets, probably things that you're not involved with. Identity is probably an area that you would be involved with. So decentralized in that space. Stable coins, so coins that are now privatized financial means to send money back and forth. If you didn't see this, one of the stimulus packages during this era was in one of the early bills, they had something about a digital dollar. So China's coming out with its own currency and they're actually piloting it right now. The United States will have this, the rest of the world will all soon have a digital token that represents the cash dollars that we have in our wallets, right? So that's transforming. There are private companies that are doing the exact same thing. So one of the reasons why Facebook was trying to come out with its own currency got pushed down was because it could potentially be in the wallets, the digital wallets of upwards of 2.5 to 3 billion people tomorrow. As soon as they turn it on, 3 billion people could use their token around the world. So another offshoot. And then there's loan systems out there and there's other security tokens. I won't spend time on that. So the digital ID in the bench, tokenization of assets is the next big thing. I think it might be a few years out. We'll see how fast. Things are moving so incredibly fast, especially in the last few months. Things that I've seen I never would have thought would have happened this fast have. Identity and privacy are not mutually exclusive. So we're going to see some changes there. Decentralized everything is likely coming in this space. So we have to wrap our heads around that. How does that work within everything that's coming onto your dockets? So this one I won't spend too much time on because I think it's really self-evident about what it is and the potential for what it could do for us in a bad way, unfortunately. So Deepfakes are tools that make are AI generated images of people appearing to say or do something that they didn't actually do. I'm going to play a video. I'm only going to play a small snippet. It's probably 2 minutes long. It's too long. So what I want to do is just play for you something that I put together not too long ago. Now, this is a deepfake of President Obama. So that is, it looks just like him, right? And the audio that you might be able to hear sounds like him, but that's not. It's totally fictitious. A comedian basically is in the background talking, and they're using AI to be able to get the same movements of his face, of the way he speaks. All of that is being put in there. And it's actually deeply concerning, especially as the election comes on. But if you think about people that are able to leverage this technology to fake videos early on, especially early on, as people are less aware of this, how do you realize that that is actually a real video? In the beginning, you're probably not going to know. You're just going to say, yeah, that's definitely got to be a real video. In the future, we'll be able to have hopefully some tools, and that's the part that we need to hash out, that will be able to fix that sort of thing. So deepfakes in the bench, I just have to say ugh, because I honestly do not know initially how you're going to be able to determine whether a video is real or not, and how some people might be faking it. You don't even know, right? Unless they're caught. So I don't have the answers for that one. I'm sorry. Virtual reality, and sort of closing this out, there's the last two topics that I want to cover very quickly. Virtual reality. I've always talked about this. It's something that I find fascinating. It's now thrown into the forefront of some of the concepts that we're talking about because there's real potential here. And there's three here. So VR stands for virtual reality. That's what you see on your screen right now. So it's like putting these goggles on and you're immersed in this environment, right? So it might be you're putting yourself into in front of the Louvre or the Eiffel Tower. I'm in Paris, so I'm able to see this. You're looking around like, there's the top of it. Whatever, you're fully immersed in that. Mixed reality is different. So mixed reality is what's coming. I put on these glasses and it sees everything in this room. It sees you in the audience. It sees you sitting in there. It sees this podium, and it projects things on top of that. So within my lens, it's actually projecting something on top of that. The hypothetical here is I see you walking down the street. I have these lenses on and I see you. It does facial recognition. It sees who you are. And it then might, right above your head, it says, okay, this is the last post that they put on Twitter, or this is the last post that they put on Facebook, or whatever the case is. So it starts to pull this stuff together. So what does that look like? Well, this is an individual that came up with, it's a company down in Florida that's working on this stuff. And Apple just recently, and the reason why I'm bringing this up more than anything else, is going to be coming out with its own lenses in probably the next 12 to 18 months, where they'll have the ability for that mixed reality. And so what you're going to be able to see are things like this, right? So your hands are real, maybe the flowers in the back are real. Clearly the elephant dancing in there is not. These kids are in a gymnasium and they have the glasses on, and there's a whale breaching the gym floor. Clearly not. That's mixed reality. So getting more practical. How does this look? What does this feel like? Well, we're talking about putting these things on. It's totally a sci-fi film, but it is coming. The ability to interact with things and do things. So more practically, the organization that I'm with is testing this so that if we all have these lenses on and we're sitting around a conference table, you can pull up a graph and you touch on something and it does a deeper dive into that. The courts, what are we going to see? Well, you're going to see more and more juries potentially using these things in concert, of course, with the attorneys to show and display something. So we're seeing this in some places around the world already where that's the full immersion of virtual reality, where you're actually able to see what's there. Like crime scene happens. Someone sadly passes away and they have the chalk outlines. They can see the street lights and the signs and the cars, and you can actually put these things on and have the jury see that, have they almost feel it, right? So that's what we're going to see, and we're going to see it already, and it's starting to happen. So this will help all parties sort through evidence and attorneys to argue their side. So you're going to see some of that starting to happen too. Again, virtual crime scenes visits, remote connections to experts, judges, and attorneys, all will be a key component to this. All right, the last topic, and I'll be very quick about this for timing, virtual personal assistants. So how will this play? I think you all know what they are. We've all become much more accustomed to this. And you may be tempted to speak into that right now because either you have an Apple phone or you have an Android device, and these are what you would normally see. But you're seeing this, right? So you're seeing the Google Home, you're seeing the Amazon Alexa, and you're seeing how people interact with them. And now the privacy concerns around that, the information that it's providing, all of those things are clearly things that we all have to be thinking about a little bit more closely. Maybe, I don't know if this is going to happen within the courts. I'm still trying to figure this out. I hope to hear from you about this as well. The ability to do entering of time or basic tasks that you want to be able to do, you would say, Alexa, open up this skill. And then you say, all right, I've done this much work for this particular case at this particular time, and you don't have to write it down, you don't have to enter it into anything. Those are the types of things that we're going to start to see a little bit more of going forward. So clearly, privacy concerns and responsibility around that is also. So with a few seconds left, I definitely want to open this up to you all. I want to hear your questions. I'd also love to hear more about what your experiences are. If you have challenges to any of this, would love to hear about that as well. I am here. I'm always willing to talk about any one of these things. I clearly am somewhat passionate about every one of these topics. It's just something I live and breathe. So feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. Happy to have these conversations with you at any point. So thank you again very much for taking the time to listen, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank you very much.